Closer to the appointed hour, the anxiety in Sergei's soul grew. He knew that he could not go, but he made a promise and seemed to have to fulfill it. Trying to come up with some excuses, he realized that everything sounded so false that it would not be possible to deceive. The wife is an intelligent woman and will immediately sense something wrong, but he was not ready to explain himself, and why explain that he was dating someone else, but loves his wife. It sounds stupid. Cursing himself for his cowardice, he drove his car towards the office building. Marina Viktorovna was dressed in a light blue trouser suit, which emphasized the dignity of her figure, and also made her blue eyes even brighter. All my dear colleagues, I say goodbye to you for 2 weeks. I ask you to be persistent and businesslike. I'll come and check. She laughed, and that's it. They clapped their hands, expressing wishes for a pleasant holiday. Of course she's ugly, Irochka said quietly, leaning towards Maria. But this Arkasha, 2 weeks of trash. Maria didn't listen too much to general conversations, and she also missed Irochka's words. She thought only about Sergei. Where is he? Why doesn't he call? What to do? Deep in thought, she went to the window, and then accidentally her gaze caught a familiar car and the figure of a man standing next to it. Sergei. A whirlwind flashed through my head. She jumped out of the office and rushed to the elevator, but it was busy. Without hesitation, she ran out onto the stairs and began to quickly go down, jumping over the steps. He came to say goodbye to her, and now he will explain everything, flashed through his head. She jumped out into the street and ran towards the parking lot. Having turned the corner of the building, she had a few meters left when she immediately saw Sergei. "Seryozha!" Maria shouted and rushed towards him, and then she stood rooted to the spot, standing near the car next to him. Marina Viktorovna looked at Maria in surprise, then turned her gaze to Sergei. Sergei's face expressed a range of different emotions: surprise, fear, dissatisfaction, and confusion. "Seryozha, do you know my best employee?" Marina Viktorovna's voice sounded silky soft. "Why did you decide to lure her to your company?" She laughed quietly. Maria was so stunned that she could not say anything. How so? This is a dream. It's not true. It's wonderful. What does all this mean? Sergei was silent. He didn't know how to explain everything. He looked at his wife and realized that he had betrayed her in the most stupid way. "I think you have something to discuss. You have a serious project, Seryozha." The voice was gentle, but there was so much contempt and resentment in it. "I'm going to the airport." "And you continue your work. Maria is a very good specialist and can really help you. Marinochka, wait, I'll try to explain everything." Sergei's voice trembled. For the first time, he understood how he not only loves, but adores his wife. He cannot live without her. "I'm not ready for explanations right now." Marina Viktorovna got into the car and slowly began to drive out of the parking lot. "Maybe you'll come in?" "Sorry, baby." He leaned over and kissed her. "We still need to get ready." Maria stood a little upset and looked at the back of Sergei as he left. Near the car, he turned to her and waved his hand. She also waved in response. Maria was upset by the news of his departure. She knew that she would miss him very much, and a certain feeling of anxiety appeared in my soul, and no matter how hard I tried to drive it away, it continued to grow. In the morning, getting ready for work, my wife preened herself in the mirror. Today is the last day before vacation, and she will go to work to give final instructions to her employees. Turning to Sergei, who was looking at her enchanted, she said, "I have already packed all my things. The plane is at 6. I thought maybe you could pick me up." "Well, I don't know," Sergei drawled. "I also need to get to work quickly. You know my project has already been launched, and I want to regulate everything." "Serozhenka, this is not a request." The wife smiled. Her voice sounded affectionate. She came up to Sergei from behind and hugged him, running her fingers under his shirt. Her lips pleasantly tickled his neck. He caught his wife's hand and began to kiss her fingers and palm. Then he turned around, hugged her, and began to kiss her beautiful plump lips. "You always have sweet lips," Sergei said, never stopping kissing. "Funny," the wife said quietly, moving away slightly. "So what are you coming to?" "Of course." The voice trembled a little. "Okay, come over and call right away." The wife fluttered out of the embrace, said bye as she walked, and slipped out the door. Sergei stood thoughtfully. He had to refuse, come up with reasons not to go to her work. What to do? Nothing. My inner voice asked me to be calm and unperturbed. Mechanically taking the car keys and closing the apartment door, he went down into the yard. "Are you silent?" What could he say? Thoughts raced through Sergei's head. So this means that my beloved wife works in the same office, and even in the same department with Maria. How did this happen? And now what I can do? An inner voice said that I needed to calm down and think about everything. "What are you doing, Seryoja?" Maria's voice brought him back to reality. "Everything is fine, honey. I'm just a little tired these days." "Well, now you'll get over it." And Maria trustingly laid her head on Sergei's shoulder. There was music playing in the restaurant. Several couples moved around the dance floor. "Let's go, let's dance," Maria said, and put her hand on Sergei's shoulder. He stood up, gave her his palm, and led her to the center of the platform. Maria gently pressed herself against him, as if she wanted to dissolve in him. She noticed that all evening he seemed distracted, even inattentive at times. "He's just tired," Maria thought. "He has so much work to do." Accompanying Maria home, he hugged her and gently pressed her to him and said, "My little one, I need to fly away tomorrow for a couple of weeks on a business trip." "How? Wait, why tomorrow? You didn't tell me anything. This is so unexpected." Tears were heard in Maria's voice. "Honey, well, it's only 2 weeks." Sergei's velvety baritone had a calming effect. "I'll arrive by the end of the month. Everything's fine." Sergei's car was racing along this highway. Tall, strong pine trees flashed outside these windows, through whose branches the bright trickled. Maria's face shone with happiness. She talked all the way about her colleagues, and she and Sergei laughed. "By the way, Seryoja, our boss is flying to Bali, so you know her deputy is such a most unpleasant..." "Terrible." Maria rolled her eyes. "On Bali? Well, yes, with my husband. They say she has a young, handsome husband."
It's true that Marina is fine. Maria continued, leaning back in the car seat. "They say he's business. And what? Why are you silent?"
"My darling, my good one," she whispered warmly. Once on the sofa, they continued to kiss and caress each other without hesitation, until they felt the desire to enjoy completely. Their passion was so fierce, almost wild, that they could not restrain themselves in their emotions. The sofa creaked, as if there weren't enough screams and moans in this room. Having uttered a hoarse cry, Sergei, devastated and happy, lay down next to Maria, who was quietly moaning, sobbing like a child. He hugged and tenderly kissed his beloved's face. They were happy. All the last days, Maria flew as if on wings. An all-consuming feeling of endless love and tenderness for Sergei filled her. Neither the boring reports, nor Irochka's importunity, nor the glances of the boss, who at times looked at Maria with interest, could overshadow this happiness. Everything turned out as she dreamed, as she pictured in her thoughts, as she wanted it. They did not meet often. Sergei was very busy with his work, but Maria was happy no matter what. If only sometimes a treacherous thought flashed in her head, she immediately drove it away, remembering Sergei's tender embrace. In the morning, the office was already seething like a hive. Everyone passed on the news to each other. Marina Viktorovna was going on vacation and flying to Bali with her husband. Everyone was happy, and at the same time, there was a kind of painful atmosphere of hopelessness. Everyone knew that Marina Viktorovna's deputy, Arkady Nikolaevich, would be replacing Marina Viktorovna during her vacation, but everyone simply called him Arkasha. In fact, he was no longer a young man, a terrible careerist, a cynic, and he sang along with his superiors. The department didn't like him, to put it mildly. Maria was not at all upset by the news about her boss's vacation. She was only thinking about meeting Sergei and living in some completely parallel world. After calling each other, they agreed to go to a restaurant on the Gulf of Finland again. At all parties, she was the center of attention. She knew how to attract people to her. She could tell a funny story, joke beautifully, and laugh loudly, but she could also argue with Sergei's colleagues about events in the world or views on certain questions that life so often poses to us. And even if someone tried to flirt, he knew that she was his only and would never stoop to a banal, intimate relationship. Not at all because she is afraid of upsetting him or losing him. No, she just really loves him. And the attention of his colleagues to her only confirmed that by marrying an older woman, he made the right choice. One of his colleagues, having drunk a little too much, complained that his young wife was only thinking about handbags, trips abroad, and all sorts of spa treatments. "Here's your wife. It's interesting to be with her. She's so amazing," the colleague said, slurring his tongue. "I'd like one too. She's probably good at sex, too." Sergei put his hand on his colleague's shoulder and, squeezing it tightly, told him that he had drunk too much and it was time to go and rest. Remembering this, Sergei carefully drove into the cramped courtyard of the old high-rise building where Maria lived. Rising up the old creaky elevator, he went out onto the landing, an ordinary door covered with leatherette. This used to be in fashion, about 30 years ago. For several minutes, Sergei stood at the door. Passions were raging in his soul. He wanted to run down the stairs, and at the same time he wanted to feel a gentle kiss on his lips again. Finally deciding, he pressed the bell button. "It's open," Mary's joyful voice sounded. "Are not you afraid?" Sergei asked, entering the apartment. "No, I was waiting for you." Maria stood, not knowing what to do. She felt some awkwardness. Sergei resolutely approached her, hugged her tightly by the shoulders, pulled her towards him, and began to kiss her passionately. Maria went limp and realized that she would not even try to resist. She wanted him. She opened her lips to meet his kiss. "Where are you going so early?" The wife stretched sweetly. Her blue eyes looked at Sergei with tenderness. "I need to go early today," he replied. Sergei tenderly began to kiss his wife's neck and shoulders. He inhaled the smell of her skin. The wife stretched out a little and pressed her husband's lips. A long, tender, and so sweet kiss. For a second, Sergei wanted to hug and press her to him, to stroke her soft and so exciting body. But he pulled away. "I have to run. I'll try to come back early and we'll have a romantic dinner." A mischievous sparkle flashed in his wife's eyes, which Sergei liked so much. The evening promised to be filled with tenderness and love. Having already got into the car, Sergei dialed the number on the phone. "Maria, good morning, dear. Seryoja." Maria's voice sounded joyful. "Sorry, I didn't answer yesterday. I couldn't. And then I started spinning, and that's it." "Oh, I thought you forgot about me." "What are you, dear? I really want to see you. You don't have to go to work today. Just say you're sick. I don't know. I'll try. We could spend the whole day together." "Yes? Oh, that's great. Okay, I'll call my boss now and ask for leave." Maria's voice rang with happiness. "Good girl, I'll come see you. Dictate the address." Having started the car, Sergei rushed to the specified address. "What's happening to me? It's like I've gone crazy," Sergei thought. "How can this be?" He loved his wife madly. She was smart, attractive, knew how to dress. His friends envied him. The boss's remark did not hurt her at all, did not upset her, did not offend her. She was too happy. Entering the department and sitting down at her workplace, Maria enthusiastically began writing her next report. "Well?" Eroshka asked at lunch. "You're shining like a polished teapot. Tell me already." "Yes, what can I tell you? I'm just happy." The smile did not leave Maria's face. "No, let's go into detail." Eroshka moved closer. "Come on." Maria began to tell. Of course, she omitted several details that could have betrayed her state of love. Irochka listened attentively, and then said seriously, "You know, I don't really like your story, but most importantly, the behavior of this Sergei. I hope you're not in love like a high school girl, because you talk about him with such aspiration. I take it you're already head over heels? No, what are you doing? I just like him. Be careful. It's a pity if everything you pictured turns out to be untrue." For a second, Maria felt some kind of anxiety in her heart, but quickly drove it away, convincing herself that everything was fine. They just needed time, and they would be together. Already in the evening, waiting for Sergei's call, Maria walked aimlessly around the apartment. Everything was falling out of her hands. She tried to cook dinner, but she didn't feel like eating. Finally, unable to bear it anymore, she decided to call herself. The phone started ringing, and then the number was reset. What is this? Communication failure? He is busy? Continuing to hold the phone in her hands, she tried to decide for herself whether to dial the number again or calm down and go to sleep. After standing with the phone for another minute, she put it on the table and went to bed. But sleep did not come. Various thoughts were spinning in my head. Irochka's words, Sergei's last words. Reflecting on all this, she decided that at the next meeting she would ask Sergei a question directly and openly. What does all of this mean? Having thus found a solution, Maria fell asleep peacefully. Some amazing excitement gripped Sergei. His beloved woman stood next to him. He was drawn to her by an irresistible force. He wanted to drown in her blue eyes, to dissolve in every cell of his body. Lowering his face, he kissed her hair. It was soft and fluffy. How he wanted her now. Taking off his jacket and unbuttoning his shirt, he gently directed his wife towards the bedroom. Finally approaching the bed, he lightly pushed her, and she squatted down and lay on her back. She was wearing a black lace chemise. The soft fabric slipped under his fingers. He felt the smooth velvet of her skin. Tired and happy, they lay hugging each other, feeling lightness throughout their bodies. "You the most beautiful, my sweet girl." Sergei gently kissed his wife's shoulders and face. "Will you have dinner?" And she laughed quietly. "Yes, a little, although I already enjoyed the sweet dessert. How beautiful you are to me." His wife's lips touched his shoulder. The evening passed quietly. Sergei's soul was light and calm. His wife had already fallen asleep, and he was happy, kissing her sleepy face. Only somewhere in the depths of his consciousness, Maria's face and her amazing eyes, filled with tenderness, surfaced. The office was already noisy when Maria walked quickly down the corridor. "This must be the first time I'm so late," she thought, mentally praying for one thing, not to meet the boss, but life takes such turns. Marina Viktorovna came out of the open door of the next office. Seeing Maria, she raised her eyebrows in surprise. "What happened to you?" she asked in a velvety, soft voice. "You were half an hour late for work." "Sorry, Marina Viktorovna, it won't happen again." Maria's shining eyes could not hide her mood. Sergei's car flew along the highway, returning him to the night city, which does not fall asleep even at night. Bright luminous shop windows of large stores, signs of cafes, restaurants and bars flashed past. The nightlife of the city was in full swing and splashed with the laughter of young people, the sound of passing cars and music bursting out of the doors of clubs. In a quiet courtyard of a new micro-district, Sergei found an empty space and parked the car. "He's home," it flashed through his head. Entering the apartment, he was enveloped in calm and comfort as if by a light blanket. The wife came out into the corridor. "Why so long?" Slightly pursing his lips, she asked in a soft voice. "I was a little late. I had to check something else." Sergei approached his wife, hugged her. The smell of her skin always excited him. It was either an apple or lavender, but something light, barely perceptible. "Have supper?" "I cooked some rice and stewed the meat." My wife's face buried in Sergei's chest, and he felt the touch of her lips on the skin under the open collar of his shirt. He liked it and froze, waiting for it to continue. Her deft fingers quickly unbuttoned the buttons on his shirt, and then her soft and warm palms touched his chest. They returned to the terrace and began dinner in complete silence. But then Sergei joked about the dish they ordered, and the conversation continued in a joking manner. "You have a nice laugh," he said. "Thank you." Evening had already begun to envelop the terrace, and Maria shrugged her shoulders chillily. Sergei started looking at his watch again. "Are you cold? Perhaps it's time to go," Sergei asked. "Yes, a little. I'm sorry, but I can't take you back." There was sadness in the words. "I'll call you a taxi." "Taxi? Why taxi?" Maria was confused. Everything was somehow strange, but remembering the kiss, she drove the treacherous thoughts away. "Yes, okay. Thank you." Putting her in a taxi, Sergei kissed her again. His lips were sweet and assertive. She responded with the same passion as during the first kiss. The taxi door slammed, carrying Maria away in complete enthusiasm and with her heart beating with happiness. Maria was glad that she had so easily persuaded her friend to replace her, and at 3:15 I left the office. Sergei's car was parked right under the windows of the building where Maria works. "Well, finally," Sergei said, smiling, opening the door for Maria. "Well, let's go." The whole trip they talked about different things, laughed, and it seemed to her as if they had known each other for a very long time. The restaurant was located right next to the Gulf of Finland. The place was cozy and calm. There were few visitors, and he and Sergei quickly found a place on the terrace overlooking the bay. Having made the order, Sergei suggested taking a walk. Hand in hand, they walked out onto the sandy shore of the beach and walked in silence for some time. The light sound of the surf, the beautiful azure sky, and them walking hand in hand. Everything was as Maria imagined in her dreams. Suddenly Sergei stopped. "Do you like it here?" he asked, bringing his face closer. "Yes, it is very nice and calm here." "You're not cold." His arms hugged her shoulders. A wave of excitement ran through the girl's body. His face was so close that his lips began to touch hers. She closed her eyes and felt the touch, light at first, and then his wet, hot lips wrapped around her mouth. His tongue slid over her lips, penetrating inside. She moaned a little from the unprecedented feeling of lightness and sweetness of the moment, and she herself grabbed his lower lip, slightly biting it, and played with his tongue. She liked it. She felt that Sergei was excited. Opening her eyes, she slightly tilted her face, breaking the kiss, and buried herself in Sergei's chest. She heard his heart beating loudly and quickly, ready to burst out of his chest. "We have to go back," Sergei said hoarsely. "The order is probably ready." "Yes, it's time. This is Sergei. Forgive me, I was so wrapped up yesterday. Tired and didn't call anymore. It was late." "It's late. But if you called at 3 in the morning, I would have answered," Maria thought. But she answered, "Oh, it's okay. I went to bed early." A lie. Small, tiny, almost the size of a pea, and yet it's a lie. "I thought so. Maybe we'll meet today, but I'm too picky about the place. I suggest a small restaurant on the Gulf of Finland. I'll pick you up at 4. Are you free yet?" "Yes, of course, I will wait." Her heart. It was beating so hard that it seemed like it would jump out of my chest. "Well, that's great. See you." A beep sounded at the other end of the receiver, but Sergei's soft baritone continued to ring in his ears. "It's difficult to free yourself at 4. You'll have to confess everything to Irochka. She'll replace you. What if Marina gets angry? How I want to go with him to the Gulf of Finland. Okay, I'll think of something." With such thoughts, Maria returned to work again. By the end of the day, thoughts of an imminent meeting were overwhelming and carried away to some romantic distance. The clock hands were approaching the appointed time. "Ira, I need to run away earlier today," Maria said, trying to make her voice sound serious. "Well, yes," Irochka drawled. "For the second day now you've been running away somewhere and not saying anything. I have problems with my relatives." Is it true? Eroshka looked at her incredulously. Okay, I'll cover for you, but you'll have to tell me everything. Fine. All the joyful and happy mood immediately disappeared. Why? This question sounded in my head. Why? What's happened? There were no answers, and Maria drove away the thoughts that she really didn't like her, with other thoughts that something had happened to Sergei. Exhausted, tired from all the worries, she finally fell asleep. June morning. Isn't it wonderful to wake up to the ringing call of sparrows, the purring of pigeons on the eaves, and the noise of the awakening city? The room, bathed in the bright June sun, was filled with the voices of people hurrying about their business. But Maria was not happy about this. Opening her eyes, she remembered the whole of yesterday evening, and she felt sad again. Getting ready for work, she thought about how she could work this day and not fall into a tearful mood. But at work, it became easier. Marina Viktorovna asked to urgently redo the report, which Eroshka corrected, since she had missed a number of important points. When making a request to Maria, Marina Viktorovna looked displeasedly at Eroshka, but she didn't raise her head and pretended that it didn't concern her. You might think there was another Eroshka in the department. The department plunged into work. Towards the end of the working day, the phone on Maria's desk suddenly vibrated sharply and unexpectedly. Her heart sank to the very bottom of her consciousness, and looking at the call, she saw the name, Sergei. Grabbing the phone from the table, she jumped out the door and ran along the corridor, turning the corner where there was a small alcove for such intimate occasions. "Hello," Maria said in a trembling voice. Time passed unnoticed, but Sergei began to peek at his watch. It was felt that he wanted to stay, and at the same time he needed to go somewhere. "Maria, forgive me, but I still need to go on business." "Seryozha, did we agree on a first-name basis?" "Well, yes." "Fine. I have to go. I'll call you in the evening." "Fine." "Yes." "Of course, no problem. I'll be glad. Then we'll hear again?" And Sergei laughed quietly. "Okay." Maria stood up from the table. "Sorry I can't accompany you." "Oh, it's okay. I'll get there myself." Maria did not want to part with her new acquaintance, but she understood that she couldn't insist. It would look too intrusive. Until the evening. Sergei came up and lightly hugged Maria's shoulders. "Thank you for the evening, it was wonderful." And he quickly left the cafe. He was really in a hurry. Maria stood for a few minutes and also went to the exit. Once at home, she could not recover from the feeling that she experienced when she found herself in Sergei's arms. She relived that moment again and again, and her heart was filled with some kind of joyful languor. It was a completely new or maybe long-forgotten feeling when someone really needs you. The evening passed unnoticed, full of emotions and happy languor. She was waiting for a call, but looking at her watch, she realized he wouldn't call her. The handshake was warm and gentle. Touching his fingers, the girl felt a certain excitement. They sat in the cafe for almost 2 hours and were not bored. The conversation flowed naturally about books, hobbies, and they even discussed the latest film and agreed to go to the cinema so that they could discuss it again later. Imagine, your step becomes the past as soon as your foot leaves the ground. The imprint remains in the past, and so on every second and minute. Finally, the hands stopped at 5:30. Maria had a couple of minutes to turn off the computer and grab her bag to fly out of the office. Eroshka even opened her mouth in amazement, but didn't have time to say anything. The office door slammed shut, leaving her completely confused. Jumping out of the office, Maria quickly walked towards the Metropole Cafe. Her heart sang. For the first time in a long time, she walked with her head held high and smiled at the people she met. Already approaching the meeting place, she glanced at her watch. It was exactly 5. Entering the cafe, she began to look around in search of her familiar stranger. In the far corner, on a red velvet sofa, sat a pleasant young man with a light beard framing his round face, on which slightly sad brown eyes shone. Maria waved her hand. The young man noticed and nodded his head. "Maria," and extended her hand. "Very nice, Sergei," Maria thought. Tomorrow she still needs to submit a report to the accounting department, and it will take a lot of time. But she wanted to meet the young man. What if this is fate? Okay, let's tomorrow, at 17:00 in a cafe on Prazhskaya Street. Great Maria, I'll be waiting for you. And now, good night, beautiful stranger. Good night. Maria closed her laptop and sighed. She wanted to ask her new acquaintance about many things. What do you like to read? Does he like looking at the starry sky? Already falling asleep, she tried to imagine how and what they would talk about, how he would look at her. In the morning, Maria felt an extraordinary rise in strength. Some kind of joyful premonition urged her on, and everything happened as if by itself. Over morning coffee in the office, Irochka tried to find out the details of the communication on the site, but she never found out anything. Maria remained stubbornly silent. The day passed in the usual work mode. Marina Viktorovna, as usual, in a pleasant voice, asked to hurry up with the last report. The morning mood did not pass. Maria lived for this meeting. She even glanced furtively at her watch. Time is a strange substance. When you want it to slow down, it flies at the speed of sound. When you want an event to fly by, like a flying baseball, time becomes a thick and viscous mass. But in fact, time is infinity. There is no beginning and no end, and it moves, regardless of our desires, the same way, second by second, hour by hour. It's only in advertising that you can return minutes or exchange them for subscriptions and podcasts. Suddenly, one of the profiles interested her. A very handsome young guy was smiling in the photo. His smile was sincere. His eyes were kind. Scrolling through his profile, Maria learned that he is interested in football, loves dark chocolate, and reads historical novels. Besides, he wanted to build a serious relationship. Maria decided to write to him, "Hello, what are you doing?" Immediately the answer came, "Oh, hello, baby. Resting. How are you?" Why, baby, Maria thought. We didn't even exchange a few phrases. But I decided to answer anyway. "I'm also resting great." "What historical novels have you read?" "Yes, that's what I wrote. It just came to mind." Nahum was written together. Probably a typo, Maria thought, and continued the conversation. "And I love to read." "But you only like to read. And what else?" "Well, I also like to walk, go to the theater, and I love to caress girls, especially downstairs." "Want one?" "What you want?" "Are you frigid?" Didn't understand. She did not receive a response to her last message. She was overcome by a feeling of disgust. How stupid, how can you write such things to a stranger? Maria thought. She was about to close the laptop, but then a message came. "Good evening, Maria Kind. You are very beautiful. Can I meet you? Let's meet, for example, tomorrow. How are you?" An hour later, the girls were already leaving the office. The city floated in the hot air. It seemed that the heat was rising from the asphalt, and the walls of the houses and enveloping everything around in a haze. Passers-by were in a hurry to quickly get to the shadow cast by the trees planted along the street. After standing for a few minutes, the girls decided to look into a cafe, where they could eat ice cream in the coolness of the hall and finally talk. "So," said Irochka, sitting down on a soft sofa. "I thought about it and decided. You need to register on a dating site." "How is that?" Maria was surprised. "Well, you go to your computer and type in dating sites and what you like there and register. That's all." Waiting for them to write. "Yes, I somehow never thought about it." "That's in vain." Irochka happily loaded another portion of ice cream with syrup onto her spoon. "You try. It's better than sitting in the evenings and dreaming about something you don't know. And why don't you like my dreams? It's all empty. In general, let my friend register today. I'll check." Irochka burst into laughter. Maria smiled and shrugged. Maybe I should really try it. At home, sitting at the computer, Maria couldn't make up her mind. In the end, typing dating sites in the line, the search engine immediately offered her options. She stopped at dating.ru, created a profile and uploaded photos, and began to wait. We didn't have to wait long. Messages started pouring in one after another. Alex, hello beauty, Serge 40. What is such a beauty looking for here? Boris Ivanov 68. You are very cute. Dennis 22. What a figure. Anton 46. I would hook up with you. Maria is a little confused. I need to answer all messages or somehow selectively. Well, it's clear that anyone under 40 is not worth attention. But this grandfather, Boris Ivanov 68, he at least saw himself in the mirror. And this Serge 40, who indicated his age in the questionnaire as 40, looks as if he is well over 50. She leafed through the profiles, answered some with, "Hello, how are you?" and left other messages unanswered. Drinking coffee in the morning at the office was a ritual. Firstly, we needed to quickly heat up the kettle and make coffee. Secondly, the office door had to be kept slightly open. Marina Viktorovna's heels sounded like an alarm bell calling on the employees to finally get down to business. The girls sat down at a small glass table and started drinking coffee. "Well, were you dreaming again?" Irochka remarked. "Listen, I have an idea." "What other idea?" Maria tensed up and put the mug on the table. Irochka's ideas were always somehow complex and difficult to implement. It was like she was trying to write a soap opera script. And most importantly, if Irochka had already come up with something, then it was almost impossible to dissuade her. Maria wrinkled her nose, imagining Irochka's next creative idea about meeting men. "So," Irochka began. But then, fortunately, Marina Viktorovna's heels began to click in the corridor, and the girls quickly began to remove cups and an open packet of cookies from the table. "That Grimza," said Irochka, "won't let you talk calmly." An elegant tall woman slowly entered the office. Her stately figure attracted the attention of men, no less than her bright blue eyes. She was wearing a black office suit and a white blouse that was unbuttoned too far. "Haven't started work yet?" Marina Viktorovna said in a pleasant, soft voice. "Today the reports are due and Valery Vladimirovich is waiting for the documents." "Okay, Marina Viktorovna," said Maria. "By the end of the day, everything will be ready." "Well, great. As soon as you prepare it, bring it to my office." Marina Viktorovna came out, and the heels of her black shoes began to click along the corridor again. In the silence of the office, the clicking of keys could be heard. Ira struck the keys with concentration and nervousness, holding a pencil in her teeth, using it to mark the lines of the contract that she was adjusting. Maria worked slowly. The keys tapped gently, and several sharpened pencils lay on the table nearby. She was calm. The work went easily and did not interfere with immersing herself in dreams again. An image from a recently read novel was spinning in my head. Dan was tall. His face expressed masculinity and at the same time tenderness. Brown eyes were attentive and sparkles of happiness danced in them. A half smile played on his thin lips, which made Dan's face even more attractive. Maria sighed. Where can one find such a handsome man? "Okay," Irochka said loudly. "I have a report ready." "Masha, what do you have?" Maria shuddered at Irochka's voice, jumping out of her dreams. "Yes, I'll finish now too. There are still a couple of pages left to check. Then, when you're done, you'll take it to Marina's table." "Fine. Yes, sure." The office was stuffy, despite the wide open windows. Tired of the heat, the city was just waking up, stretching lazily, preparing for the noisy bustle of the new day. Maria loved this time. There were no employees in the office, and she could dream a little. And Maria loved to dream. The sea, the sun, the shady alleys of the park. It would be nice to take a walk. But is it interesting to walk through the park alone? "Hello." It was Irochka, a pretty woman, but extremely eccentric, who burst into the office. The joyful greeting indicated that Irochka managed to slip through the corridors of the office without meeting the head of the department, Marina Viktorovna. Why are we sad? Why are we dreaming? Maybe some coffee.